But before then, I'd like to turn it over to Shawn Townsend. Shawn is the Director of Nightlife and Culture for the City of Washington, D.C., and he's here to discuss how their office has engaged and mobilized the nightlife industry to reimagine what reopening would mean for them. The title of his talk is Effective and Authentic Community Engagement. Shawn, thank you for being here.
And thanks for having me, and good morning to everyone. I do have a PowerPoint, and I'd like to share that at this time and kind of give you a quick overview of the office since we're still fairly new, but then also bring you up to current times and talk about how we've been able to adapt during the pandemic. So Jen, if you can share your screen and we can get started. Perfect. You can go to the next slide. So the Office of Nightlife and Culture here in DC was created in 2018. It seems like it was so long ago. And the reason that this office was created is partially because of the rich cultural history that DC has. We're the home of go-go music, which just became the official music of the city. Black Broadway, there was a huge Black Broadway scene here back in the 60s and 70s. We're a sports capital. It's one of the largest LGBTQ plus populations in the city. And believe it or not, we have a renowned punk scene here in the city. So lots of culture and lots of nightlife, of course. Next slide. So as I mentioned, this Office of Nightlife, this night mayor, night czar, whatever you want to call it, it was a trend that started across the water in Amsterdam, and then it traveled around through Europe, and cities like New York and San Francisco and Orlando had adopted this title, this position. In some cases, it is an internal office in government. In some cases, it's quasi-government dealing with some type of external organization advocating on behalf of nightlife. So in DC, we pretty much mirrored the New York legislation for their office. And the mayor signed the bill that was introduced by a council member in 2017. And as of we've been hitting the ground running ever since December 2018. Next slide. So starting in December of 2018, we literally started building a car from scratch and trying to figure out what our responsibilities was going to be. How could we make the best impact on the nightlife and cultural scene here in DC? It was thriving, but in order for us to thrive internally in the office, we had to figure out things that we can do to help keep the city thriving, sustain the nightlife and cultural scene that we have. So here's just a little bit about what we do, and most of our time is probably spent on educating the nightlife industry and engaging with the cultural industry and the creatives and ensuring that government is thinking about consistently how we can provide opportunities for folks in the industry. Next slide. So along with the office, there is a commission, and it's comprised of members of the public, whether it's art, restaurant. There's some government officials a part of this commission as well. And it's literally just to address common concerns and complaints within nightlife and culture, but also proactively have discussions about how it can be better. And I think that we have done a good job in terms of really discussing issues and addressing them by way of sending recommendations to the mayor and city council to consider legislative changes. Next slide. So in order to determine how we could best assist in the industry, we had to figure out where we were in terms of numbers, in terms of data. We really needed to create some type of baseline so that we can kind of determine where we're going. So one of the first things that we did in the office internally is we conducted a nightlife study, and we just released those results of the study back in February of this year. And as you can see on the right side, these are pretty amazing numbers for our city. Folks spend $7.1 billion in DC at night, and this is 65,000 jobs. So we have a lot of part-time and full-time employees who rely on nightlife and culture in the city. And the left side is a hyper map of our nightlife and arts and our cultural hubs, and you can kind of see the downtown area in the center, and it stretches out into different neighborhood pockets throughout the district. Next slide. So of course, we released this glossy nightlife study back in February. We went to Seattle to highlight all the good things in DC at a nightlife conference sponsored by the Responsible Hospitality Institute. And literally, as we got off the plane in Seattle at the top of March, I got an alert on my phone saying that the first person in the US had succumbed to the virus in Seattle. So at that time, the mayor was scheduled to travel with us, and she had canceled her plans to travel to Seattle because of the start of the pandemic. And that trip really, we did not realize how bad it would get until we actually made it back to DC, and we had to shut things down. So I believe in April is when the mayor announced the Reopen DC Advisory Group. And it was the start of, it was the start of our recovery process. But in order to recover, we had to come up with a plan. So the mayor announced this group, and we put together co-chairs, and as you can see, former Secretary Michael Chertoff and former Ambassador Susan Rice really guided us through this phase of planning to recover. Next slide, please. So I was involved in two different advisory groups. Number 3 is faith, arts, culture, hotel, sports, and entertainment. And this included nightclubs and our performance venues, theaters, etc. But then I also was the committee or associate director for the committee of restaurants and food. And we literally met with, operators. I spoke to Jose Andreas Daly because he's so vested in DC and has, I think, a handful of restaurants here. And we wanted to really carve out some suggestions and guidance for these respective industries moving forward. So this guidance that you see broken out by stages was included in a packet that was submitted to the mayor and our health department here to determine how we should begin to move forward in stages of recovery. Next slide. And this is just this is actually the restaurant guidance that we submitted to the mayor as well. And we are currently in stage 2 of this guidance. And thankfully, most of the guidance that was submitted and suggested, the mayor did in fact implement. And we are indoors 50%, outdoor seating, no bar seating at this time, no bartenders at this time if you have bar seating. So there were some things that we had to adapt to. And of course, our restaurants and bars had to turn into food retail establishments. And food is the common denominator these days in DC. So if you are open and you are in the nightlife business, 100% you are selling food. And we have, I think adaptability is the word that I would describe how restaurants and how nightlife establishments have had to, really sort of move through this pandemic. They've had to shift their business model in order to survive. Really, we've seen a lot of places close for good, and we've seen some places close temporarily. And hopefully, the toughest of times has passed us, and we are moving forward. Thank you. Next slide. So this was our micro grant to small businesses as a part of our recovery. And as you can see, we dumped out a lot of money to businesses. And that we actually were one of the first jurisdictions in the country to provide some relief to small businesses. And this funding actually helped some nightclubs pay rent, even though they weren't open. And it also helped restaurants who were closed. It also helped them to manage some of the expenses as well. So that was initially our first round of relief. And that was also based on, this was without any federal funding at the time. This was all funding that DC government used to provide some relief to the industry. Next slide. And then, so moving forward through the pandemic, as we move to stage 2 or phase 2, and restaurants have begun to open up indoors and outdoors, we wanted to make sure that we were reminding folks to mask up. So we did a Mask Up DC campaign, and we created some graphics, commercial. We did a huge marketing blitz with some operators along with the Restaurant Association here in DC to ensure that we thanked our patrons for masking up and protecting themselves, but also protecting our workers who have jumped back into the industry to make a living. Next slide. So bringing you closer to present day, last week, the mayor announced another grant program that we have decided to do. And we do realize that, the new norm includes more outdoor dining at this time. And as we approach the colder months of the year, we wanted to help businesses with defraying some of the costs that they will endure as they set up their outdoor patios and dining areas, winterizing these spaces to prepare for cold weather. So we are now accepting applications and offering a one-time grant of $6,000 to each business that applies and is eligible, just based on some small requirements to help them defray some of that cost. And happy to announce that we are approaching 600 businesses that have applied for this funding as of today. And yes, this is CARES Act funding that we are using for this. So interesting fact, DC was recognized as a territory in the initial first round of CARES Act funding. So because we are recognized as a territory and not a state by the feds, we were shorted $755 million of CARES Act funding. So we did not get the 1 point, I think most states got upwards of $1 billion on the 1.2. We did not get full funding. However, we operate as a full state, and we were relying on receiving full funding. So we are literally lacking the resources from the federal government that we need. And this is an important reason why statehood is such an important issue for us DC residents here. So I know the mayor and lots of other stakeholders have been pushing statehood, and this is one of the reasons. So I've had to explain to our industry that this is why the city is having a tough and difficult time with providing the real relief that they need, like other jurisdictions are doing. So we're hopeful that the Senate will pass the bill this week that includes the money that we were shorted on the first round of stimulus. Excuse me. So the House, Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senator Chuck Schumer, they've been very helpful and supportive of us being made whole. And it passed the House this week, and hopefully the Senate will do the right thing and we'll be able to use that funding. City Council did pass a bill 2 months ago that authorizes the executive to fund a grant program up to $100 million of CARES Act funding or federal funding to provide grants to nightlife businesses, sports and entertainment venues, restaurants. But we need that funding from the feds in order to make that happen. So until then, we are doing what we can with what we have. And this is part of our efforts to help businesses defray some of that cost. Next slide. So where do we go from here? Throughout this pandemic, we've seen businesses close down and move into phase one, where they were selling household products, trying to get rid of inventory. I would purchase my toiletries from a restaurant just to show some support. And then we moved into a phase of outdoor dining, and also takeout and to-go of delivery is now an option for restaurants as well to help generate some revenue. And then we moved into 50% capacity of indoor dining. And now, as we have flattened the curve and we've done all of the things that the science and the doctors and the health experts have told us to do, our numbers look pretty good, and we will hopefully soon be approaching stage 3, where it allows for more opportunity for businesses to open their businesses even more, and then also for bars and nightclubs that have been closed through stage 1 and stage 2 who don't sell food. Stage 3 allows them to open in some capacity. And then it also allows for places like the Kennedy Center and theaters and art galleries, at least on the local level, to open their doors a little more for patrons and visitors to come in and enjoy themselves. DC, we in last year in 2019, we saw close to 30 million visitors to the city. And so, as you can imagine, our tourism took a hit. And we are hopeful that as we move through the stages and as a vaccine is readily made available to everyone, we will then start to see visitors come back to the district. Next slide. So our streetery program, we've seen lots of businesses survive because we've made outdoor dining available, whether it's sidewalk space or space onto the street, parking lane, curb lane. In some areas of the city, we've also shut down streets, as you can see in the picture, where this is a DuPont Circle area of the city where we've shut down a street and we've allowed for restaurants to expand to provide outdoor dining. We're seeing lots of patrons prefer outdoor as opposed to indoor, even as we approach colder weather. So we wanted to at least extend the opportunity for businesses to operate outdoors. So we have, we have an agency here, actually a couple of agencies that have partnered and collaborated to ensure that we're doing everything we can to allow businesses to expand outdoors and also do it safely. Next slide. And then this is another area of our city in downtown. Downtown DC has taken the biggest hit, where we have a lot of federal buildings and large companies that have, since the pandemic started, they are working from home. So that has impacted small businesses who rely on the foot traffic of federal workers being downtown every day. So as an effort to attract some foot traffic downtown, our downtown business improvement district has started a similar streetery program where they've allowed for some nearby restaurants to expand to an area where they have about 300 seats to allow for patrons to enjoy outdoor dining. So this just started last week, and they've received some good positive feedback, and I think folks are enjoying the opportunity to visit downtown and eat at some of their favorite restaurants. Next slide. And that's pretty much it. We, like I mentioned in the one of the previous slides, adaptability has been the name of the game here in DC, and we've just been happy to engage with businesses to get their feedback on how we could help them adapt during these times. And I think that engagement has allowed for government to make decisions that positively impacts everyone in the industry. So that concludes the presentation. I think there were a couple of other questions. It looks like your grants average a little less than 10K. I know any amount is helpful, but do you think that you'll need to do more if you can? Absolutely. By no means do we intend to give this 6K and just have the restaurants and just kind of figure it out on their own. As we can find and locate funding, and if we do get that funding from Congress, we will definitely do everything we can to provide the industry with more relief. I mean, it's needed. We rely heavily on our small businesses, but more importantly, our hospitality industry here in DC has been hit the hardest. And there'll probably be some of the businesses and venues that open up last, and they were the ones that closed first. So the mayor has made it very clear that if there's more funding available, we should be looking at ways to provide relief. Yes, we're using CARES Act funding for the grant program. Have you ever heard of bars closing to the public and doing full rentals as a special event to navigate restrictions? We have seen a couple of places do this here in the city. One area that was challenging for our businesses and for event planners here in the city was live entertainment. Live entertainment was restricted until recently, and we just launched a pilot program for live entertainment to collect some data, create a baseline of metrics and guidelines. So moving forward over the next 4 weeks, we'll be monitoring a handful of establishments that were invited to participate in the live entertainment program to ensure that after the pilot is over, we can we'll have a baseline, and we'll be able to create some more live entertainment opportunities for business to have. So yes, to answer your question, we have seen some places, some bars close and reopen as restaurants, and they've rented their spaces out to chefs and caterers to offer additional dining options to clients. And I think I covered all of the questions. Yeah, that's it.
Great. Thank you, Shawn, for sharing your insights and expertise on this important topic. I know it's relevant for a lot of folks here today and across the country.